The mirror in the staff washroom at the Royal Saskatoon Hotel was streaked with somebody else's hairspray, and I remember thinking that was the perfect kind of detail nobody warned you about. You picture moments like this, when you finally know, and in your head there's some kind of music or weather. There wasn't. There was just a fluorescent light buzzing over a chipped sink, and a smell of bleach, and a woman I barely recognized in a black vest, 2 sizes too big for her. I'm 64 years old. My name is Margot Henrietta Forsyth, although for that one evening I was wearing a name tag that said Gina. The girl in HR had asked me if I minded a temporary name, and I said no, I quite preferred it. She thought I was being practical. I was being a coward, I think. I wasn't ready to hear my husband say my own name out loud in a room full of strangers and not know me. You should understand something before I go any further. I didn't go undercover at my husband's company gala because I am a brave woman. I went because I had run out of other ways to ask the question. My husband, the man I have been married to for 31 years, is the chief financial officer of a mid-sized engineering firm in Saskatoon. He is the kind of man who irons his own shirts on Sunday nights and keeps a tin of mints in the glove compartment. He is meticulous. He calls his mother every Wednesday. He has, for the better part of 2 years, been having an affair with a junior accountant at his firm, although I did not let myself say the word affair in my own head until much later than I should have. The signs were stupid, in retrospect. A second cologne in the drawer beside his belts, a receipt for 2 creme brulees at a restaurant in Stonebridge on a night he said he'd been working late on a tender, a new way of holding his phone, screen down, palm flat, as if he were keeping a small animal still. None of it was proof. All of it was proof. I told my husband I was going to visit my older brother in Regina that weekend. My brother is a widower, and he doesn't mind being used for alibis, although when I called to warn him he was quiet for a long moment and then said, "Margot, are you sure you want to know?" I told him I was already sure. What I wanted was to be sure in a way nobody could ever take away from me. So I drove to the Royal Saskatoon Hotel on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the firm's annual gala, and I walked into the events kitchen and asked if they needed any extra hands for Saturday night. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, asked if I had experience. I lied. I told her I had served at the Bessborough years ago, back when my children were small, and could she please not put me near the bar because my back was no good for trays of glassware. She didn't even look up. She wrote down my name as Gina M. and asked me to come in Saturday at 3. I walked back out into the parking lot and sat in my Forester for 20 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel, shaking. I kept telling myself, you don't have to go through with this. You can spend the weekend at your brother's. You can drink the wine he keeps for guests and listen to him complain about the deer in his garden, and you can come home Sunday and never know. But I'd come this far. And I had read enough novels in my life to know that the women who turn around at the parking lot are not the ones the story is about. Saturday afternoon, I arrived back at the hotel with my hair pulled into a tight gray bun and my reading glasses in my apron pocket. I'd practiced my own face in the mirror that morning, the way you practice a piece of music you're afraid of. Mostly, I'd practiced not crying. The supervisor, whose name I learned was Carlene, walked us new staff through the floor plan of the ballroom. 300 guests. Plated dinner, 3 courses, a speech from the CEO, an awards portion, an open dance floor. The head table was at the front, beneath a banner that read, "River Stone in Coinering. 40 years of building, what matters?" The irony of that banner was not lost on me. It is, in fact, the only thing I can remember laughing about all evening, although I did not actually laugh. I was assigned a section in the middle of the room, 4 tables, none of them the head table. That was, depending on how you look at it, either a mercy or a misfortune. My husband arrived at 6:45. I saw him through the service door before he saw anyone else. He was wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for his 60th birthday and a tie I didn't recognize. He looked, I'll admit it, very handsome. He looked like a man who was happy to be where he was. He had brought her with him, not on his arm, not openly. But they walked through the foyer together with that loose, unconscious choreography of 2 people who are used to one another's pace. She was 33 or 34, with dark hair cut blunt at the shoulders, in a sage green dress that draped over a belly that was, unmistakably, between 5 and 6 months along. I had seen her once before at a Christmas party 2 years ago, when she had been newly hired and slim and had shaken my hand and called me Mrs. Forsyth. I had remembered her then because she had a small chip in her front tooth, like a child who had bitten down on a popsicle stick. I went into the washroom and threw up, very quietly, into the second stall. Then I rinsed my mouth, fixed my lipstick, and went back to the floor. The first hour, I worked on autopilot. I'd waited tables in my 20s to put myself through teacher's college. The body remembers. Breadbasket on the left, plates from the right, water glasses topped up at the 11 o'clock position. I learned the names of the people at my 4 tables. I poured wine for an older couple who told me they had flown in from Halifax just to see their nephew receive an award. I told the woman she had a beautiful brooch. She told me her late mother had given it to her. None of these people knew I was watching the head table the whole time. My husband sat 3 chairs down from the CEO. She, the woman in the sage green dress, sat directly beside him. Not across the table, beside. I watched him pour her water, twice, before she had to ask. I watched him touch the small of her back when she stood to greet someone, that quick reassuring press of the palm I used to feel between my own shoulder blades at faculty Christmas parties decades ago. I watched him laugh at something she said and then lean over and murmur something back into her ear that made her cover her mouth. I'd told myself on the drive over that I was prepared. I wasn't. There is no preparation for watching the man you married become someone else's husband right in front of you in a room of 300 people while you carry their dirty bread plates back to the kitchen. Around 8 o'clock, between the salad course and the entrees, the CEO stood up to begin the formal part of the evening. He was a portly man in his early 70s, white-haired, the kind of old Saskatchewan businessman who still says fellas in mixed company without quite realizing it. He welcomed everyone. He thanked the spouses. He thanked particularly the wives, without whom none of us would have a clean shirt to come to work in. And I had to set down the wine bottle I was holding because my hand was no longer reliable. Ben, he said he wanted to single out a few people for special recognition. He moved through the list. Sales numbers, contract wins, the Heritage Railway Breach project up near Prince Albert. Polite applause. Then he said something I will remember to the end of my life. He said, and finally, I want to recognize someone who has been the financial backbone of this company for over 2 decades. He has steered us through the 2008 crash, through the oil downturn, through the pandemic. And, if the rumors I'm hearing are true, he's also got some happy personal news this year. So I'd like to ask our CFO and his lovely partner to please stand up. My husband stood. She stood. He took her hand. The ballroom erupted in applause. A man at the table next to mine raised his glass and called out, with the lubricated cheer of a 4th glass of wine, to the happy couple, "When's the wedding?" And my husband of 31 years, the man whose mother I had nursed through her last 6 months in our spare bedroom, the man whose name is on the deed of the house I am still paying property tax on. My husband laughed and squeezed her hand and said, loud enough for the room to hear, "Sooner than you think." I was standing maybe 12 feet from him, holding a tray of empty glassware. He didn't look at me. He didn't see me. Not even when he glanced past the waitstaff in that polite, unfocused way. Wealthy men glance past waitstaff in that polite, unfocused way. Wealthy men glance past waitstaff at galas. I was wearing a name tag that said Gina and a face he had not seen properly in possibly years. It is a strange thing to be unseen by the person who is supposed to know you best. I want to tell you it broke my heart, but actually it did something quieter than that. It clarified me. I carried the tray back to the kitchen. I set it down on the dish pit. I stood with my back against the steel counter for a moment, and Carlene, the supervisor, walked past and asked if I was all right, and I told her I just needed 2 minutes. My back was acting up. She told me to sit down on the milk crate by the walk-in. I sat down on the milk crate by the walk-in. I took out my phone and I made 3 calls. I want to tell you what the next 15 minutes looked like because they are, I think, the most useful thing I can offer anyone who finds themselves in a situation like mine. The first call was to my brother in Regina. I asked him to drive to my house that night and let himself in with the spare key from the planter and pack a bag for me. Underwear, my blue cardigan, my pills, the cedar box from the top of my dresser. He didn't ask why. He said he'd be there by midnight. The second call was to my daughter in Calgary. My daughter is a partner at a mid-sized law firm. She is 41 and she has, since she was about 9 years old, possessed the cold, steady judgment of a woman twice her age. I told her briefly where I was and what I had seen. She was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "Mum, listen to me very carefully. Do not say a word to him tonight if you can help it. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything, don't even pick up his phone calls. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow morning. Are you safe right now?" I told her I was safe. She said, "Good, then go finish your shift like nothing happened and come straight to a hotel after. Not our hotel, a different one. Text me the address." The third call was to a man named Ruben Vasquez Hartwell, who had been my husband's accountant for 19 years, and who, for 15 of those 19 years, had also been mine. Ruben and I had taken a Mediterranean cooking class together in the spring of 2014. We had not spoken since the end of the course. I had his number because I'm the kind of woman who never deletes a contact, just in case. He picked up on the second ring. I told him who was calling. I told him where I was. I told him what I had just witnessed. He said, "Margot, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you have your own copies of the joint tax returns for the last 3 years?" I told him I did. I keep everything. I have a green filing cabinet in the basement that my husband, in his life, has opened exactly twice. Ruben said, "Don't go home tomorrow. Don't go home Monday. Go to your daughter's hotel and call me from there at 9 in the morning. We have a lot of work to do." Then I stood up off the milk crate, smoothed my apron, and walked back out onto the floor. I served the entree course. Beef tenderloin or the vegetarian risotto. I poured red wine. I cleared dinner plates. I refilled water glasses. At one point, I passed within 4 feet of my husband and his partner, close enough to smell her perfume, which was something citrusy and young, and I asked if everyone at the table needed anything else. And my husband said, "We're fine, thanks, dear," in that absent-minded way he uses with dental hygienists and grocery cashiers, and I said, "Of course, sir." And I went on. I want you to understand, I was not calm. I was not unfeeling. There was a sound in my ears the entire time, a kind of high, steady ringing, the sound a kettle makes about 10 seconds before it really starts to boil. But I had spent 31 years being a good wife, and 36 years before that being a good daughter, and 4 years before that being a quiet, observant little girl in a farmhouse outside Yorkton. And all of that meant I knew how to keep my face still while my insides were doing something else entirely. I worked until the dance floor opened. I watched my husband lead his pregnant girlfriend out into the center of the room to a song from the year our daughter was born. He held her with both hands on her lower back. He bent his head to her ear and said something, and she laughed, and I thought I have stood in that exact spot in another ballroom in another dress in 1994, and he held me the same way, and I do not know which one of us is the ghost. Carlene found me at 10:30 and told me I could clock out. My section was clear. I'd worked harder than half her regulars, and would I please come back next month for the medical conference? I told her I would think about it. I went back to the staff washroom. I took off the vest. I put my own coat over the white shirt. I walked out the service entrance into the parking lot. It was snowing in that fine, half-hearted way Saskatoon does in late October, more like static than weather. I drove to a Holiday Inn out by the airport and checked in under my maiden name, which is Lindenmeyer, and which I had not used in over 3 decades. The clerk at the desk had to ask me twice how to spell it. I sat on the edge of the bed in that beige room with my coat still on, and I did not cry, although I had been planning to. What I did instead was open my laptop and start a document. I called it Nodes, and I wrote down, in order, everything I had seen and heard that night. The names. The phrases. Sooner than you think. The way he had touched her back at the foyer. The CEO's exact words. I did this because Ruben Vasquez Hartwell had told me to, but also because I have learned in 64 years of being a woman that memory is the first thing they try to take from you. Make it her imagination. Make it her bad nerves. Make it her age. I was not going to give them anything to work with. My daughter arrived at 10 the next morning. She knocked once, came in, sat on the bed beside me, and held my hand for about 3 minutes without speaking. Then she stood up, opened her laptop on the desk, and said, "All right, let's begin." What followed over the next 11 weeks was, I think, the most coordinated thing I have ever been part of in my life, including raising 2 children and organizing the Lindenmeyer family reunion of 2007. I will not bore you with all of it. The broad shape is this. Reuben sat down with me on the Monday and walked me through our finances. My husband, it turned out, had been doing 2 things I did not know about. The first was that, beginning roughly 18 months earlier, he had been moving small but steady amounts of money out of our joint checking into a numbered account in Alberta, nothing large enough to trigger anything. The CRA's friend Reuben called it the slow drip. Over 18 months, it had amounted to a little over $94,000. The second was that he had, 6 months earlier, refinanced our home equity line of credit with my signature and used a portion of it to put a down payment on a condominium in the Riversdale neighborhood. The condominium was in his name only. I had signed the refinancing papers at the kitchen table on a Wednesday evening in April, between a roast chicken and a phone call from my sister, because he had told me they were just renewal forms. I had signed them. I had not read them. I had been married to this man for 31 years. My daughter took copies of everything to her partner at the firm, a family law specialist named Ottilie Brockenshire Riley. Ottilie is, in person, a small, gray-haired woman with hands like a pianist and a manner so soft you might mistake her for someone you could push around. You would be making a mistake. Ottilie took one look at the file and said, "Margot, dear, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that what your husband has done is, in several places, fraud. The second is that we are not in a hurry. We are going to do this properly. We took 5 weeks, during which I went home on the Sunday after the gala and acted like a woman who had spent a weekend at her brother's in Regina. I made my husband a roast on the Monday. I asked him how the gala had been. He said it had been long. He said the food was mediocre. He did not ask about my brother. He did not ask about me. He had been so completely sure of my absence that he had not even bothered with a cover story. For 5 weeks I lived in my own kitchen as if I were a guest there. I cooked. I did laundry. I went to my book club on Thursdays. I sat across from my husband at dinner and listened to him complain about the new HR director and the price of fuel. At night in the bathroom with the fan on, I photographed financial documents on my phone. I went through his sock drawer and found a hotel key card for a place in Riversdale, and I photographed that too. I found a prescription bottle for prenatal vitamins behind his shaving kit, and I left it exactly where it was. Ottilie called me on a Tuesday in early December and said it was time. The papers were drafted. The forensic accountant had confirmed the diversion of funds. The numbered account had been traced. The condominium was documented. There was, additionally, an HR matter, because the firm's code of conduct, as is the case at most engineering firms in this country, has a specific clause prohibiting undisclosed romantic relationships between executives and direct reports. The pregnant woman, whose name I will not write down here, although by then I knew it as well as my own children's, was a direct report of my husband's, 2 rungs down the org chart. Reuben, who knew the CEO socially through their curling club, had quietly asked whether the company was aware of the relationship. The CEO had said he had been told it was a recent and casual matter. Reuben had not corrected him. He had simply, as he later described it to me, let the silence do the work. On a Thursday morning in the 2nd week of December, 3 things happened more or less at once. At 9 in the morning, my husband received an email from the firm's general counsel requesting his presence at a meeting at 11. At 9:15, a courier delivered to our front porch a sealed envelope containing notice of divorce proceedings, a freezing order on all joint accounts, and a copy of the forensic accountant's report. At 9:30, I left the house with 2 suitcases, my mother's silver, my grandmother's quilt, the cedar box from the top of my dresser, and the cat. I did not leave a note. Ottilie had been very clear about the note. She had said, "Margot, you have already told him everything you needed to tell him. You told him the night of the gala by being there and by leaving. You don't owe him the dignity of an explanation in your own handwriting." I drove to a small furnished suite my daughter had arranged for me near the river, on the Nutana side, and I set the cat down on the rug. And I sat in the armchair, and for the first time in 11 weeks, I cried. I cried for about 40 minutes, then I made myself a cup of tea, and I unpacked. What happened to my husband, I will tell you only in outline, because the details are not really my story to tell anymore. He lost the condominium in the settlement because it had been purchased with funds derived from a misrepresented refinancing on the matrimonial home, and Odalie Brockenshire Riley is very, very good at her job. He lost roughly 60% of his pension because the forensic accountant was able to demonstrate the diverted funds. He kept his position at the company, although he was quietly removed from the executive committee, and the CEO, I am told, no longer invites him curling. The young woman in the sage green dress had her baby in late February. I do not know whether they married. I have not asked. I do not require the information. I bought a small house in Nutana that spring, with a south-facing kitchen, and I painted the front door a color my husband would have hated, which is a kind of soft mustard yellow. My daughter came up from Calgary for the move. My son, who had been the harder of the two children to tell, flew in from Halifax, where he teaches high school history. He sat with me on the porch the first night in the new house, and he said, "Mom, I just wish you'd called me sooner." And I told him honestly that I hadn't called anyone sooner because I hadn't been sure, and the worst thing in the world, when you are a 64-year-old woman in a 31-year-old marriage, is to make a fuss and turn out to have been wrong. He said, "Mom, you have never made a fuss about anything in your life." I think that was the most honest thing anyone said to me through the whole business. I want to say one more thing before I finish, because I have read enough of these kinds of stories in magazines over the years to know what people want from them, and I want to be careful not to lie. I did not feel triumphant. I have not, since this all happened, woken up in my mustard yellow house and felt the swelling music of a woman vindicated. What I have felt, mostly, is quiet. I have felt the strange weightlessness of a person who has put down a sack she has been carrying for so long she had stopped noticing it. I have felt, on bad days, lonely. I have felt, on better days, like someone I had forgotten about is slowly walking back into the room. If you are watching this, and you are a woman of any age, but particularly if you are a woman of my age who has been told her whole life that her job is to keep the peace and keep the home and not make a scene, I want to tell you something. You are allowed to know what you know. You are allowed to gather your evidence quietly in your own time, the way a person gathers kindling. You are allowed to call your daughter and your old accountant and your brother in Regina, and you are allowed to put on a black vest 2 sizes too big and stand in a room full of strangers and watch the truth of your life with your own eyes. You are allowed to take 15 minutes on a milk crate by a walk-in fridge to decide who you are going to be next. And then you are allowed to walk back out and finish your shift and go home, not to the home that was, but to the one you have not yet built. I am building mine. The kitchen faces south. The cat sleeps on the quilt my grandmother made in 1958. There is a cedar box on the dresser, and inside it, among other things, is a name tag that says Gaina, which I kept because I wanted to remember the name of the woman who saw, finally, what I had refused to see. She did me a great kindness. I owed her a place on the dresser. I think about that milk crate by the walk-in fridge more often than you might expect. It was a small, green plastic thing, the kind you see stacked behind any restaurant in this country, and I sat on it for less than 15 minutes. But I have come to understand that everything that mattered happened in those 15 minutes. Not the gala, not the toast, not even the moment my husband said, "Sooner than you think," to a room full of people who did not know my name. The crate is where I chose what came next, and the choosing is the part nobody tells you about. I had spent 31 years believing that being a good wife meant being a soft place for someone else to land. I am not sorry I believed that. But I have learned, late, that softness without truth is just a slow kind of disappearing. My husband did not wake up one morning a stranger. He became one by degrees, and I let him, because confronting him would have meant confronting myself, and I was not ready. Cause and effect. He moved $94,000 in small drips because I did not look at the bank statements. He refinanced our house at my own kitchen table because I trusted his hand on the pen more than my own reading. None of that excuses what he did. But it taught me that the people we love are also a test of our own attention, and inattention has a price. What saved me in the end was not anger. Anger is loud, and loud women get dismissed in this country and most others. What saved me was a quiet kind of intelligence I did not know I still had, I called my daughter before I called him. I called my old accountant before I called a lawyer. I photographed documents in the bathroom with the fan on, and I let 5 weeks pass while a tired-looking lawyer named Audley built a case I could stand inside of. That is the trick, I think. The one no magazine ever prints. You do not win these things by exploding. You win them by being patient enough to gather the evidence of your own life. And courage, real courage, is not the thing you do in a ballroom. It is the thing you do on the drive home, and the morning after, and the 11 weeks after that when nobody is watching and there is no applause. It is making the roast on Monday. It is going to book club on Thursday. It is sleeping next to a man whose pocket contains a key card you have photographed and rising at 6 to do it again because Audley has asked for one more bank statement. If you take anything from what happened to me, take this. You are allowed to know what you know. You are allowed to be slow and deliberate about your own rescue. You are allowed, at 64, to begin again in a house with a south-facing kitchen and a door painted a color somebody else would have hated. The cat sleeps on my grandmother's quilt. The cedar box is on the dresser. I am, finally, the woman who lives here.